That's the Madison Square Garden in New York. Bob Arum for top rank, Josh Taylor going in against Teofimo Lopez. The WBO World Super Lightweight title was on the line, but we all know who the main man in the division is, or should we say was, Josh Taylor, after losing to Lopez by unanimous decision, 115, 113 times 2, and more realistic in my eyes, 117, 111 as well, all in favour of Lopez, the winner. We were talking off air about this, Andy. It might sound a little bit hyperbolic, but Taylor, to me, I'm not saying he is this, but he looked like a listless fighter. He looked like a shot fighter. He had no legs. He had no engine. He was holding on at the end. I thought just to stay in the fight, had very little to offer. I've said it before on this podcast. He's climbed the mountain and now he's sliding down the other side a little bit. He is tight at the weight. We all know that. Things move fast in the sport of boxing. And it turns out Teofimo Lopez isn't quite the busted flush that we once thought.
It's very true in all counts, mate. I think a lot of people probably got it wrong, probably really looked too much into Teo's personal life taking effect on him. Which it is, obviously will have an effect on you if you're going through a divorce and, you know, you're sure that kind of court issues with your son and all that. It is going to have some sort of effect on him, but for some reason, for 40 odd minutes, he seemed to put it all to the side and just dial in, and turned up last night, and he turned up in a big way. Massive, man. I mean, you could say, Josh, is this the next thing in terms of weight and that, but still, you got to go in there and win the fight against a bigger guy. You could see he was bigger than that as well. Josh, I think, had put on something like 16 pounds, the rehydration and that. Maybe that was made him sluggish, but mate, I think we could all safely say is he has not been the same fighter since he left Shane McGuigan back after the Regis Prograis fight. As much as his performance has been like since then, no great. The Ramirez fight was probably one that he kind of really stepped it up a wee bit, but it got kind of close down the back half of the fight as well. Josh Taylor coming up through the ranks was a beast. He would be all action. You all saw how he fought against O'Hara Davis. You all saw him how he fought coming up through the ranks and that as well. He was absolute aggressive. When you got you on the ropes, he was pinging the body, he was uppercuts, and he was really kind of putting damage on you. For a moment there in the 10th round there last night, you had Lopez on the ropes, and he didn't even throw a single shot. I'm saying, time's up. That's, you know, that was his moment. If he was to get himself back into the fight, because I agree with you, those two scorecards, 115, 113, were far too close. 117, 111 is probably about fair, probably right actually. So coming into that as well, I just think he was having problems with the pace. He held his feet, looked slow on his feet. Nothing that he landed was really kind of phasing Lopez. Seen Taylor get wobbled just at the kind of tail half of the end of the 7th. I just felt like Taylor felt like he could maybe just walk forward into Lopez, and Lopez, for some reason, as I say, he's put it all together there last night. He's come back to his amateur game, and he just went back to boxing. You saw how quick he was. That right hand was rapid. The feet were fantastic. Okay, he's doing a bit of clowning around in that, but, you know, that's his mojo back. He's getting confidence. It was probably the best he looked for me since the Lomachenko fight, and I think he's probably just negated or neglected his natural boxing ability and just decided that he's got the power, he can step in himself and bang away. Which you saw against George Kambosos, it's not really the case that if he meets someone who's wanting to kind of match him. In terms of Taylor and that as well, as it could be a combination of things. Shane McGuigan not been the same fighter since he left there. He's had a very long amateur career, and he's had a lot of hard fights in his pro career and that as well. So maybe he has left a wee bit in the gym, a wee bit in the ring and that as well, leaving it on the scales and that. But at the same time, as you can't take away from what Teofimo Lopez did there last night. He was absolutely on point. Probably made a fool out of everybody there, or most people, shall we say. But I still go back to it. He just has not been the same fighter since the Prograis fight. I think Josh Taylor. It probably kind of showed going down the back half of the fight. He was always in great condition, always ready for the 12 rounds. As you say, he was sort of hanging on there towards the back half of the 12th round with some of those body shots. He got rattled a few times, Taylor, throughout the round, that to the head and body after the 9th round and that as well. There was a question whether Taylor could come on strong down the stretch, really, and he really needed to come on strong. And there was a moment in the 10th when Taylor had Lopez on the ropes, as I mentioned, and he just didn't do nothing, done nothing with him. And then the old adage we always say, we've seen it with James DeGale, when we see fighters changing stances during fights, it's a clear sign they're frustrated, that they're getting nothing home, there's nothing landing for them. which Taylor was doing as well. Down the back half of that fight, he was switching stances, trying to change it up, and he was just getting picked off. And that's it, basically. I don't know what next for him, to be fair. If he's he says he's going to keep fighting. If he's going to keep fighting, then he needs to be out quick. I think he needs to be out before the year finishes at 147.
Yes.
Who he fights, I don't know. To be fair, obviously needs a couple of tune-up fights to see how it goes. But I agree with you. I think it's now on the slide now. I think he's achieved a great deal. Not many people can become undisputed champions. And I think once he did the Ramirez job and that, it was job done basically. And it's been hard to kind of maintain it for him to try and. But fair play to Lopez and that as well, as you cannot deny the guy and that he really stepped it up, because it looked like Taylor had the perfect camp. It looked like his weight was spot on. He didn't look drawn so much on the scales, and by his own admission, he had a great camp in that as well. So there's no excuses in that regard. It's just on the night, Lopez turned up and just turned it on, and it was tremendous to see. Actually, it really was, because I didn't think he had it in him. And over his last few performances, he's neglected his own boxing skills. And last night he brought it back, and he brought it back in abundance. It was a great performance.
Yeah, he did. He kind of brought back the energy I felt that we were feeling with Lopez whenever he was coming up through the weights. Shout out to Big Beatbot Boop, who's thrown in the 199 super chat. He's asked a question as well, which we will touch upon very shortly. First of all, Mr. Boop has said, he said it was the best he'd felt at the weight. That's a lie. I think so as well now. They're talking a rematch afterwards. Josh threw in. I think it was just cursory mention of a rematch. I don't really want to see that. Does nothing for me. Don't think he can do anything differently at that weight. Taylor has sort of been fooling himself in many respects for a while now. I think he appeared unmotivated. He was emotionally disinterested. I just don't think his body could do what he wanted. His mind wanted it to do. The fire, as Andy said there, just was not burning. And I think as well, also, Andy, as much as Teofimo grew into the fight, I felt like Taylor's performance allowed him to visibly grow in confidence. As he saw Josh waning, he wasn't using that huge size difference. At the beginning, I was surprised how big he was compared to Lopez, and getting that jab going. His performance allowed Lopez to visibly grow in confidence. He started smiling, dancing, giving the impression to everyone he was winning the fight. Then all of a sudden, he was winning the fight. Regis Prograis was texting away. There was a definite shift in momentum. After about round 4, I found it very difficult to give Taylor anything. I think his performance allowed Lopez to grow in confidence and handed it back to him. I think a dominant, on-form, fit and firing Taylor shuts that fight right down. He pushes their mental demons into Lopez's head, Andy, and closes him out right down the stretch. But he really allowed him to grow in confidence.
It's the same. It looked like once you get Lopez into a rhythm, there's no really many people who could probably beat him. Actually, to be fair, and you say once he got the confidence going, he was, the ego was up. He was looking cockeyed and all that stuff. He has got physical gifts that can't really be taught to people. He's got the speed, he's got the footwork. It's just the wee bit on the outside. It's the fragility, his mental state, and that kind of holds it together for long enough. That is a real thing. But he's proved everybody wrong big time. You see, I really did think it was close to being done. I mean, we all saw that thing, that interview with Kriegel, with his dad coming in the back there, and the kind of argument that broke out, that type of thing. That made, according to Tim Boxer, that made ESPN Sports Center. Now that's a big deal. I think that's their main sports page over in America, and that's the whole thing made ESPN over there. So it kind of like saying, what's happening here? Is he burned out a wee bit like Tyson, possibly? Promising fighter, 22-year-old, and he's washed up. He's lost his titles. He's losing everything else. Outside the ring and that. It's just can he adjust? And I listened to Bob Arman that after fight. Apparently they had someone else in camp, possibly for to help with the training. So maybe that's probably helped matters in that as well, because I was really going to ask the question after I heard that, actually, how much of that performance there was Teofimo Lopez rather than his dad giving him the instructions. Maybe his dad said, look, you need to get back to how you were as an amateur, boxing, moving, counter punching, using that speed. Because did you catch the two jabs that Lopez threw in about the 9th or the 10th round, like Superman? He just jumped off the ground.
Yeah, when he dived in, a bit like Lopez, who fought Conlan there, I thought recently.
That's confidence, man. That's when you're really in the fight, or as you say, as he's in the fight, but now he's winning the fight, and just that confidence was just leading up to it. And I says those jabs, some of those late shots and those counters were really, really successful. And I just can't rate that right hand high enough as to how he was catching Joshua. And you can see as well as, I'll say the last 3 rounds, but certainly the 12th round, I thought Taylor slowed down. And by the way, did the two of those judges not give Taylor the 12th round?
I didn't see the individual scores, although I was interested in how they went.
Aye, someone might. I did see them, but someone might be able to confirm it in the chat there. But I'm pretty certain the two judges that maybe had it 115, 130. I'm sure had the 12th round to
He's
Josh
surprised
Taylor.
at that. I thought he was clinging on towards the
Oh
end. That
mate,
seems like those type of scores that they want to, when they want to tighten up their scores so they don't look like outliers at the end, like an Adelaide
aye,
bird. Better tighten up my scores so I can tuck in unnoticed here.
aye. So you didn't want it too wide, but you want it even
Yeah.
kind of close.
Oh,
You
it
didn't want to be.
happens. We know it happens.
Aye, I know. Oh, of course it does. Of course it does. But yeah, look, I suppose the other thing as well is the other real winner on all this is probably Teofimo Lopez's mental health and that as well, considering. And I don't believe for a second he's retired. I do not believe that for a second. He's maybe just want to take some time away and go and deal with his issues and that, and then come back. But he ain't going to walk away with all that cash. It's going to be on the table now after that win. Shakur Stevenson, maybe a Devin Haney fight if the ballfire can try and get the finances together and that. Yeah, but as I say, look, we all know Lopez can, he can do that. But it's the thing is, can he maintain it, and can he? Is it an interest thing? Is it a level thing? Does he fight down to the level of his opponent? Does he fight up to the occasion? Don't know what it is really, but if he can keep it together and that, the kid will have a very, very successful career. Saying that, 25-year-old, two-time lineal champion, two division lineal champion at 25 actually. So I suppose you could maybe argue that maybe Catrell should be the lineal champion after the Taylor nonsense and that as well. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, possibly. Shout out to my esteemed co-host, Matty DiGianardo, who can't be with us, but he did send a point in to me on WhatsApp, which Andy's just picked up on there, so I'll just throw it out
Was it
now.
10th round? Sorry, 10th round. Somebody said in the chat.
Oh, was it right? Okay. Well, that's that confirmed. Matty says the only point I would like to make for the pod, if you can incorporate it, anything for you, Matty, is that Teo's greatest asset is also his biggest problem. He fights to the level of his opposition. I wonder how much of a bigger problem that is, Andy, because even though he looked shit against Camper and he looked even worse against Sandor Martin, if he can just get through those fights as best as he can, and obviously the Cambosos one didn't quite work out, and perform like that in these big fights, then maybe fighting down to the level of opposition isn't the worst kind of detractor you can have in your whole career.
No, I suppose not as well. I remember all the shit that he got for the Nakatani fight, but then obviously we didn't know that it was actually a slanging match going on behind the scenes in the dressing room with the mum and the ex-wife.
Right.
And then
just get through. You just got to get through those fights, haven't you?
Exactly, aye. Just walking out to the ring like that and all that shit going on, and then he comes back with that massive commie knockout, and then the Lomachenko win. Obviously, it's the COVID era and that as well. So maybe that kind of like stunted his development a wee bit in that as well. We knew the weight was becoming a wee bit an issue as well at 35, and he blamed that for the Cambosos loss, but there will be an element to that as well, fighting down to the level of his opposition. But when it comes to it's probably just the occasion that matters to him rather than the opponent, possibly, But it just shows you, the two biggest names on his resume, Lomachenko and Taylor, in terms of prestige or titles or talent, he stepped up on both occasions and won them well as well. Actually, to be fair, so. Big game player. That's all you can say, mate. End of the day, if you can win the other fights, it's like the old saying that if you can beat the weird teams in the division, that is fine. But you got to beat the bigger ones when it matters. So He's done that, and you can't knock it. Fair play to him.
No, absolutely fair play to him. Ames making a point as well, which I think is quite a good one. He said Teo twice now subverting the trope that showing emotional vulnerability in a fight week is detrimental to your in-ring performance. Yep, as Michael Thompson says, sometimes fighters just find that peace in the ring. I thought he might be going the Tony Ayala route, but he definitely isn't at the moment. He seems to have got himself together in the ring at least. Hopefully we can, pretty much similar to Taylor, like Andy said earlier, if we can get Lopez out again soon, get him fighting, get him training. Although he does seem to keep himself in pretty good shape, actually. He doesn't seem to be someone, for all of his mental demons and fragility, who actually blows up in between fights. So I don't think keeping him in the gym is a problem, but keeping him focused. Hopefully Bob can get him those big fights now and keep him on the right path. Shout out to Jay Rich there. He's got a Welsh flag in his commentary, in his little icon thing there. I haven't seen that name before. He's made a couple of points, which I don't necessarily agree with, but you're very welcome anyway, Jay Rich. He said, I don't think Taylor was that bad. I just think Teo was that good. I don't necessarily agree with that, actually. I think Teo was good, but as I said, he rose into the contest. He grew into it because Taylor was just so listless and bad, and I think it gave Lopez confidence. And once he hit that groove and he hit that momentum from the mid-rounds, he's a very hard man to stop, and Taylor just wasn't getting any stronger. Also, Jay Rich says, he upped his game from the Catrell fight. I'm not necessarily sure he did up his game from the Catrell fight, because if you remember in the last 3 rounds of the Catrell fight, 10, 11, 12, even though he wasn't looking great, he was really trying to force the fight. He was making it dirty. He was trying
A
to
lot of
grab hold of
clinches and that.
Cattrall. He was pushing him back. It wasn't effective work, but he was really going for it. I didn't get that impression last night that he was really going for it. Like in that 12th round, he was doing anything but pushing Lopez back, trying to get the knockout. In fact, he looked like the person who was going to get knocked out or knocked down, at least, if anybody was. He does have a very good chin, though, Kazagi kind of chin. I think he does take a shot very well. Beatbot Boop, by the way, I mentioned earlier, threw in a question. We'll throw it out to you now, Andy. He says, do you think Josh could go to the Kronk team? And I'll just throw in as well, styles, coaches, etc. I think everything better last night for Taylor came off the jab. And then he stopped using the jab. He started posing in range. He wasn't doing anything. He was standing off, trying to box at times and load up, got caught out. He seemed more effective when he was trying to smother Lopez, as he did with Cattrall before, using his physical strength, take away the Lopez space and the distance. But there was too many periods in that fight when he didn't do either. He didn't stand off and jab, or he didn't smother Lopez. He stood in no man's land, square on, getting knocked with shots. It's almost, to me, from McGuigan, which was his peak, to Davidson, to McNally. Doesn't matter who's in the corner. He looked like a fighter last night who was caught between styles. He just didn't really know what to do.
Also, he was having severe problems with the footwork and that as well with Lopez. Lopez was turning him quickly, and obviously Josh having to then turn. He's trying to reset himself before he knows where Lopez is then halfway across the ring, and he's then got to follow him. He did catch Lopez with some good flush shots, and that, I think around about the 8th and the 9th. And I think there might be a slight cut or maybe a bruising around about Lopez's face a wee bit, but it never had really much impact on Lopez. I thought Lopez took Taylor's best punches, ate them as such. Didn't never look flustered. I didn't think anyway. With some of those shots. As for the Cattrall fight, I agree. There hasn't really been a marked improvement, in terms of performance levels, and that, because the reason why I was so confident about Taylor coming into this fight is obviously I mentioned Lopez and the fragility of him, or shown outside the ring, and that you just wonder if it's going to catch up with him at some point. But with Taylor, just this thing with moving camps, and I just think it's just come at the wrong time. He's just completely missed the boat. Actually, I really think he has missed the boat here. Made the wrong moves. I don't know if he's been badly advised not to change trainers. He said he wanted to take control of his own career. Well, he done that. He changed trainers. He went with Ben Davison for a couple of fights. Couldn't become undisputed, and it's been odd down the hill against Cattrall. It was desperation stage, and even when we were watching it and knowing it was desperation, thinking Cattrall was winning the fight, he never really done anything different. He wasn't really really landing anything heavy on Cattrall. Cattrall was never really flustered as well. And again, I think it's a fine balance between possibly the weight or he's on the slide. It's just simple as that. And I go back and mention it. Taylor's had a lot of hard fights, amateur and pro, lengthy pro amateur career. Didn't he turn pro until what? 25, I want to say, mid-20s. And then you think about, he's been pushed up through the ranks pretty quick in that as well. He only had, 19, 20 fights?
Very quickly, hard fights under the McGuigan tutelage as well. We only left McGuigan because
regular
of the MTK
fights
thing.
As well.
There was no other reason to leave McGuigan. It's because of the MTK thing.
Aye, maybe. Again, that's what I mentioned about being poorly advised and that.
Yeah.
But again, it's just with all Pete Tong and that. It just shows you, boxing waits for no man at the end of the day. It was a good matchup on paper and that as well, but then Lopez just made it look not so much easy. I thought Taylor must have thought he was just going to I felt as well, he's going to overwhelm him. But it just shows you boxing is great. That it just shows that sometimes it's just all down to that class of styles. And the fact is that Lopez was happy to kind of take that wee half step back. He wasn't willing to hold his feet for long as well. He was willing to move, box. That's what really befuddled and offset Taylor in that as well, is he couldn't get Lopez to stand with him for long enough to trade it out. And if they did, Lopez was usually having the final answer.
And on Beatbot Boop's comment as well, going to the Kronk gym. I mean, I think stylistically it might change a few things, but I don't think it's there. I mean, that's the last place he needs to be. I know they're not like Tommy Hearn sparring anymore, but putting in work in that gym and trying to incorporate that style, I just don't think he's got it in him anymore. I think he's just burnt out.
I don't know what he does different, mate. I mean, I can remember Josh being in the gym pre-Olympics 2012 London, and he was in sparring Ricky Burns, and he was giving Burns, I think he was champ at the time as well, gave him everything he could handle. He was a machine, constant engine. Whenever there was a break, he was always bouncing on his toes, ready to go again, and that type of thing. Didn't see that last night. There's no bounce. Didn't seem to be a lot of snap. He came out early in the first round. He was really kind of like, on it then, and then it just seemed to kind of fritter away. Is it the gas? I don't know, mate. It's even changing trainers at this point as well. I mean, this would be his fourth change in his career. He's still got one of the boys in his corner for his amateur days. I think it's Terry McCormick, the guy's name is.
Yeah.
He was there last night, but maybe
That's
he
not
goes
going to
back.
change the legs going at the wafer. That's
No.
not going to change the stretch last night. That was a physical thing for me. I think he was really desperately trying to do things, and his body just wouldn't respond for whatever reason. I don't think sticking someone new in the corner is going to change that, personally.
Yeah, even at 140, mate, and if he wants to go at 147, his time's limited up there as well. I mean, I don't know what age Josh is at this point, 32, 33 possibly. I think going to pull up the rankings, but he's not going to be getting title shots anytime soon, is he?
He's 32, yeah.
32, and not going to be getting title shots anytime soon. I'm just going to pull up the rankings here at 147, see what we've got here in terms of names. Obviously, you need to think about ESPN. No, great. I mean, what's inspiring for you here? Alex Rocha, Cody Crowley, maybe the Virgil Ortiz fight, but he's having problems making
What
the
about the
weight.
WBO route? Who's high up there? Because he's more likely, isn't he, being a champion, to get another shot up there quicker, I think, with them. So
You got Blair Cobbs, Giovanni Santillan, Jamal James, Liam Taylor, and
Jamal
Mario
James, maybe.
Barrios.
Different. Jamal James, PBC, though.
That Gayazov, the Uzbekistan, I think he fights next week, actually.
There's nothing there that
There's
you'd be
nothing there.
interested in.
There's nothing there that would really interest you. And really, any of those names that you're looking at, obviously they're top 10 ranked names. And that Taylor probably would step into the top 15, possibly. You need to start picking names out of that top 15 to start fighting them if you want to keep going. But it's a hard one, really. I really don't know what you do with Josh Taylor at this point, to be fair. And changing camps, I don't think is going to be the answer, really, to be fair, either, because he's even put out a statement saying, great camp, thanks to the team and all that, named them all. So it seems that he'll probably stay with those guys at least. It's a hard, again, some of these names here. Charles, you got Echo Esserman. I see the
He's
top
not going to
15.
go back to that level, is he?
Well,
I don't think.
He's going to have to go back to some sort of... He's going to have to come down a level, mate. Really.
Have an Essien kind of level, I think, maybe.
Possibly. But he needs to come down a level, really, to kind of see where he's at. Because he's going to go up in weight, I think. This time he's going to go up in weight. But he needs to have some sort of kind of bounce back to see what's happening, see if he's still got it, see if he's still got the appetite for it and that as well. He must have made a shitload of cash during that boxing tournament as well, the World Boxing Super Series and that. So
I hope so, because he deserves it. I've said before, I heard on different American podcasts them kind of going on about his run and it wasn't all that. That's absolute bollocks, man. I'm not having that for a second. The Catchall loss and the Catchall fight and the Teofimo loss, as damaged as they are to his legacy or whatever, I don't think they'll take away from that run he went on. It was a Froch-esque run, and actually Joe Burns threw this in beforehand. He said this is before the Lopez fight, but if he beats Lopez, who has the better British boxing resume, Carl Froch or Josh Taylor, I'll always say that run that Froch went on is really hard for beat. Love him or hate him. And I saw him on Showbox actually on Friday night, being inducted into the International Hall of Fame. That was an amazing run. But Taylor's wasn't far off in terms of them people he was beating. You can turn around and say, oh, it was all this, and like Ramirez, he pushed him and knocked him down, and Prograis and this, that, and the other. No, I'm not having that. It's a load of bollocks. And Baranchik, they were really, really good versions of Postal, Baranchik, Ryan Martin unbeaten, Prograis, as we mentioned, Ramirez, etc. That was a hell of a run. That was.
You need to remember as well, a lot of people, and some people forget this, had the O'Hara Davis fight marked as a 50-50 fight. Loads of folk had backed Davis to beat him. And I think they're all surprised that it's how it kind of turned out, because that was one of that when I think about Josh Taylor at his peak, that's what I'm thinking about. The beatdown he put on that night is prime Josh Taylor, and that is how I expected him to be looking there last night, and he didn't have it. And what are we now? That was 2017. That's what 4 or 5 years ago. Just shows you. Yeah. Your peak 1 minute and then like you're on the slide the next. I really think he is on the slide. I mean, you remember all the kind of bruising he used to take, the cuts and that. Remember the Vasquez fight? He was swollen in that one. He had a badly swollen eye against Prograis. Been in the wars, and you've all heard the stories about the sparring wars and that. if something got dropped low or there's a wee sneaky elbow running about the ribs or whatever, and that the fucking wind must have come down, and Taylor would go to war. Maybe that's just taken out of him as well. Gym wars, the weight, and his professional career and his amateur career is all added up, and it's now coming home to roost.
Yeah, the too inactive, as Danny says, you can't have that inactivity when you're busting your guts to make weight. Absolutely. Jim McDonald makes a good point as well. He says 23 likes and 1,183, 14,183 listeners. Some of you need to start exerting yourselves onto that like button. That's something that we can agree with. One final point about the main event before we move on to just a quick recap of the undercard and then on to the other fights, Andy. I rate the referee Michael Griffin, but I think he needs to be stronger. This wasn't an issue as the fight went on, but I saw early on he allowed Teofimo Lopez to micromanage him at times. They clearly had a word beforehand saying, keep an eye out for Taylor. He pushes the head down. He does this, that, and the other. Both of them were doing dodgy moves. Lopez, if you notice, he sneaks off to the side and drops an elbow in at times. And he pushed Taylor as well, which is fine. But every time Taylor did anything, Lopez turned around to him and micromanaged Griffin. To a couple of times, he turned around and actually pulled him in. And Griffin went ahead, like almost on puppet strings, and called a timeout on behalf of that. I'm not a fan of that. The referee needs to be mentally stronger for me.
Yeah, that's a Canadian guy, and obviously Josh got his own.
He's a good ref too.
I'm just trying to remember if there's any other fights that he's maybe been a bit suspect in that, but yeah, you get it in that as well. I mean, it would have been interesting last night if it had. Obviously it was quite feverish crowd for Lopez. It'd be interesting to see if Taylor had actually maybe even got that decision. And the fucking crowd would have been mental. But yeah, the ref. To be honest, I wasn't paying much attention to him in that, but he was. I remember when Lopez, I think he turned his back a couple of times, possibly. I think the ref had said to me, "You need to turn back round about. You can't turn your back in that." And then I think when they were kind of locking up, he turned his back on Josh Taylor again. He was then hitting a kind of like back, he was throwing a punch for like behind his back, really, kind of like on Josh's stomach, that type of thing. Just shit like that, really. Stuff that shouldn't really be going on, and stuff that should be getting curbed out. And then obviously Lopez had that funny moment towards the end, like right at the very end of the last round. He ran away into the corner just before the bell rang. I was like, what the fuck's all that about? And the ref's like, look, where he gone, dude? So yeah, see, I thought the ref was okay, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of micromanaging fights. Not the best refs are the ones that are not really involved. The refs that kind of jump in and make sure that the fight stops once the round ends, and that they're the best ones. And let the guys sort it out and that. But you got to kind of like cut it down the line in that as well. Both guys are taking the piss.
Both guys are taking the piss. Josh Taylor, who knows where he's going to go. Lopez's career is back on the way up. You are listening to the Boxing Asylum Nuttos podcast, episode 527. Teo is a very good fighter, says Des. Taylor is a good kid, but does this just come down to levels? Possibly. I'm not sure. Des, to be honest. I just think it just wasn't there for Taylor. And the version that went in against Prograis would have given him a lot tougher of a fight and possibly won the fight. Andy's the only one with me at the moment. Hopefully the boys will jump on at some point. If not, we shall motor on through. Me and Andy are used to doing this in punches from the past, which you can go over to patreon.com/Boxing Asylum to listen to. If you wish, shout out to the chat. We'll give them a proper rundown shortly, or run them over with a big truck. Quick rundown of the undercard. I only saw Xander Zayas, unanimous decision over Ronald Cruz, dropped him in the first round, looked really good. After that, a little bit one-paced at times, not much variety. He looks like a decent prospect though. He's only 20 years of age, plenty of time to get that on track. He won the Miguel Cotto Award as well for Puerto Rican Day weekend. Bruce Carrington getting a win. Omar Rosario, Robson Conceição, and Polanco ended up in a headbutt, so it was a no contest. The big Polish heavyweight Kneiber defeated Olguin on points. Bit of a red flag there. Most decent people knock out that Olguin. And Henry LeBron with a 10-round win over Carlos Ramos. I only saw Xander Zayas off that one. What else were we going to ask? I was going to mention Callum Walsh as well, actually, in California. He got a 4th-round KO win over Carson Jones, who's 43-16-3 now. There was a bit of headbutting going on there, and Callum Walsh managed to get rid of him. Good prospect under the Freddie Roach banner, originally from Cork. Definitely one to keep an eye on.
I thought the Teofimo Lopez performance was really good. Actually, you're lucky for you, Steve. You're coming to me at 10 past 10. I've done a round-by-round dossier on each of these fights. No, I'm joking. I think Lopez, he's very athletic, so he was able to kind of leap in and out of range. Couldn't miss with the fucking right hand. I thought Taylor was a bit dead. Didn't really offer much to try and get back into the fight. It was kind of huffing and puffing a little bit. But Lopez didn't have to be brilliant in setting up the shots. Now, in the end, he ended up like walking him onto uppercuts and everything. He was like fucking having a field day towards the end of the fight. I thought the 115, 113 cards were a joke. Thought Lopez was a clear winner. Clear winner. And Taylor looked a bit dead, to be honest with you. And like this move to 147, I think the top guys at 47 would absolutely fucking kill him based on his last two performances. But going into the fight, I didn't see it playing out like that. I thought Taylor back to a bit of form, like his previous at 140 shown like fucking gritty victories against hard fighters like Ramirez, fucking Prograis, Baranchek. He's been smashing through like Postol, top guys like. And I thought like after Lopez's last performance against Sandor Mountain that he'd be a bit slower, a bit more kind of second to the punch, but he dominated. He seemed to be able to load up on the right hand anytime he wanted to. Taylor was feeling it, so he's carrying power up. And whatever you say about Lopez, he's now beat the man in two divisions, so he might not be like them, the universally thought of best 140 pounder, but he's beaten the man who was the man at fucking 140 in Josh Taylor, and at 135 in Lomachenko as well. So he's got something. I hope for him that he can somehow fucking escape the fucking. Like he looked completely disheveled in the post fight again, ranting, rambling, confronting the media, but then like seeking their approval and stuff. It's obvious like that the chap is not that fucking bright. Like, and I just hope that for his sake, he is a really good fighter, that he's able to kind of escape the inner circle that he's with at the moment, which I don't see. So it'll be always interesting watching him fighting because, he is talented, he has power, he's exciting, and he comes to fight when he's on his game. So it will be interesting to see what happens. And then there's always the circus that follows him as well, unfortunately for him. That's going to play a factor in how far he goes in his career. So that was a good fight.